You're viewing Canada's superstation, NTV. From coast to coast in Newfoundland and Labrador, this is Issues and Answers with Lynn Burry.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Issues and Answers. Our special guest on this week's program is Jennifer McCreath, and our guest panelist this week is one of NTV's photojournalists, Heather Gillis. And Jennifer McCreath, first of all, thank you for coming in today.
Thanks for having me on the show.
Our topic is people who are transgender, and that's a topic that we've heard a lot about over the past number of weeks in light of Bruce Jenner, who is now Caitlyn Jenner. It's received a lot of attention. You are a transgender person and an advocate for transgender people in Newfoundland and Labrador and in Canada, of course. Before we get into our interview, we want to play a report that was prepared by CTV News in Vancouver, and it is the story of the transformation of Bruce Jenner, who is now Caitlyn Jenner.
Caitlyn Jenner stepping out for the first time in the pages of Vanity Fair and in spectacular fashion for photographer Annie Leibovitz.
Bruce always had to tell a lie. Caitlyn doesn't have any secrets. I'm free.
Free, say some, to become, among other things, a fashion influence, a vivid representation of inner strength and late-in-life confidence, all while wearing such A-list designers as Badgley Mischka, Zach Posen, and Donna Karan. For Caitlyn, that confidence is hard-won, telling Vanity Fair she had a panic attack after facial feminization surgery and breast augmentation on March 15th, reaching out to a counselor for guidance and reassurance. To ABC's Diane Sawyer, Jenner had confessed another deep fear.
Were you terrified to tell your children?
Yes, every one of them. Why? Those are the only ones I'm concerned with, and the only ones in my life that I can't allow to, I can't let myself hurt them.
Jenner's daughter Cassandra telling the magazine she fretted before meeting Caitlyn for the first time at a girls' night. I was just nervous that I wouldn't make her feel comfortable, Cassandra recalled, adding, "We talked more than we ever have. We could just be girls together." Caitlyn also addressing questions about her sexuality in Vanity Fair, with something of a shrug. If you have a list of 10 reasons to transition, sex would be number 10. That answer building on Jenner's words to ABC.
Are you a lesbian? Are you a heterosexual who...
There's two different things here. Sexuality is who you are personally attracted to, who you turns you on, male or female. But gender identity is how to do with who you are as a person and your soul and who you identify with inside.
That gender identity, once a crisis, now a point of pride for Caitlyn Jenner.
And that report was prepared by CTV News in Vancouver. And Jennifer McCreath, that whole story with Caitlyn Jenner has received so much attention. Millions of people watched that interview with Diane Sawyer. And it was fascinating on so many levels, because here was Bruce Jenner, the athlete in the 1976 Olympics, who was considered to be the top male athlete in the world, a sex symbol by many people. No one would ever have thought back then that Bruce Jenner would end up being Caitlyn Jenner. She's received a lot of support through this whole period. As a transgender person, how do you look at that? What has it meant?
I think ultimately I'm really excited to see just the magnitude of stories, positive stories about people coming out, transitioning, and to have like a mainstream celebrity. It demonstrates to the world that anybody can be trans and anybody can transition. And all these old stereotypes from the 60s and 70s are completely being called out and saying, oh no, trans people, it's something that could literally happen. And I guess at the same time, I'm a little concerned because not all trans people are going to be exactly like Caitlyn.
No, and I wanted to ask you about that, because some people would make the argument It's difficult anyway, let's face it. I mean, anytime you have to go through something that's very personal and you talk about it in the public, I'm sure it's a very difficult situation. And she even said in the interview that, always having to tell a lie, I mean, terrified to tell her children about this. But some people would look at all this and say, gee, it must be somewhat easier when you have $100,000 that you can spend on cosmetic surgery and you have the lifestyle that Caitlyn Jenner has.
Absolutely. I mean, transition requires a lot of resources, financial resources, medical resources that most people don't have easy access to. And even in 2015, there's a lot of doctors that put their hands up and say, I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with how I can help you. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, to live 65 years before finally feeling ready and able to pursue the transition it's got to be bittersweet in some ways, because, I mean, you've lived most of your life, and now how much of it do you have left to be your true self?
What do you think of people who make the comment, well, you've gone 65 years like this, why are you going through all this now?
Well, they don't know. Only one person walks in Caitlyn's shoes, and that would be Caitlyn. And, I mean, it was difficult enough for me to make the decision, I'm going to transition. We're going back to 2007 now, and I'm going to do it in a place like Newfoundland where there's been practically no information or familiarity with this. Not only is it going to be a tough transition, there's going to be an education piece. Everyone affected by me in any way is going to have to be briefed on this. And especially in sports, I'm an athlete. I've run 30 marathons, and I'm really excited that there's now an athlete at this level who can now hopefully stick their nose into the discussions, because the athletic industry is one that's still way behind the times in terms of accepting diversity. Heck, there's only one out gay football player in the NFL. And, I mean, 10% of the population is LGBT, apparently. Mm-hmm. So there's obviously a lot of athletes that are still in the closet.
Mm-hmm. When did you know that you were transgender?
In my case, it took me a long time to figure it out. It wasn't until I was an adult, into my early 30s. I always knew something was a little different about me.
In what way?
I guess just not feeling
that you
fit in socially. It's interesting. You look at the first, say, 6 or 7 years of my life. I mean, those first years, you're all just kids, and there's really not a lot of segregation between the gender roles, and there's obviously no puberty or anything like that. It wasn't until I had kind of gone through life and experienced things or did not experience things that there was enough puzzle pieces to put together to realize, okay. And I think part of the problem is the education system. I mean, now I was raised a few years back, obviously, but you don't learn about this in school. You don't learn about this in even I've been to college, I've been to university, nothing, zero. This was left on me to figure out myself. And it wasn't until there were so many clues staring me right in the face that I couldn't take those blinders anymore. It's like it was right in front of me. Guess what? This is what it is, and this is what you have to do.
Mm-hmm. Caitlyn Jenner spent a lot of time wearing female clothing. Was that something that you did before you realized you were transgender, or?
Yeah, I essentially gradually, slowly adopted feminine type of well-beings, including attire, types of products I would use, but this was mostly at home. And it wasn't until I left the nest, shall we say, and got it on my own that I had more, I guess, private time to explore who I was myself. And from there, it didn't take very long until I was going through my laundry basket. And it's like, there's no men's clothing in here. What am I doing? This is a little different. And luckily, by 2007, there was something called the internet, so I could research and learn about this. And oh my goodness, yep. I found other trans people that had posted their stories, and yeah, that's exactly. And I sat down that night and made a list of clues. Can this really be true? And going back to when I was 8 years old, I made this long list of hints that, yeah, now everything, those weird feelings, those confusions, now everything makes sense. Why couldn't I have figured this out earlier? Oh my goodness, now I got to get a job and make some money so I can and get in shape to do this.
Heather?
What was the most difficult part of transitioning and going on this path?
I think the biggest challenge has been getting people to realize that it's still me, and my credentials are still valid. I hold a university degree and a college diploma, and I've got 8 years of work experience in the public service and policy development. Yet now it seems very difficult for anyone to be willing to hire me for a job that requires any more than high school. And I think we're still fighting the myths and the stigma that this is a mental illness. And there's still a lot of fears of what are people going to think if I hire a trans person? What are my customers going to think? If it's a government job, well, are people going to vote for me if I hire Jennifer or someone like her? And I think that's why I do as much outreach as I can and say yes to every radio microphone or TV camera or speaking engagement, as well as try to draw out as many other trans people. It's not everyone can be out. It's not safe for some people to be out, especially to the younger folks. They might get thrown out of their home. But the more that can be out, the more information that can be shared with the world, the more we can realize we're all just human beings. In fact, some of us have some spectacular resumes. I guess I'm no longer the greatest trans athlete in the world. I'll gladly concede that to Caitlyn.
On that note, we're going to take a short break. We'll be back with more of Issues and Answers.
Full of options, and she's rated at 46 miles per gallon.
Because, frankly, they can trust me in confidence that I won't reveal.
Welcome back, everyone. You're watching Issues and Answers, and Jennifer McCreath is our special guest on this week's program. And Jennifer is a transgender person who is here to talk about what it's like being a transgender member of society and the struggles that people have to overcome. And there are lots of struggles at this point. I remember hearing about an incident with you at an airport. I believe it was back in 2011. And what was the stage? You had just had surgery, I think, at this point?
Yes.
Can you take us through what happened there? Not a pleasant experience.
No, I guess, ironically, what happened to me was almost the exact opposite of what happens to most trans people at airports. The main issue is trans people go through their transition, but for those who have not had any type of bottom surgery, their identification documents have not changed. In some other cases, it depends on which province you live in or where you were born. Bottom line is people are showing up with identification documents that either don't have the sex match, male or female, versus the presentation of feminine or masculine. In my case, I had just completed my surgery but did not have my new paperwork. Our dear friends in Nova Scotia, Vital Stats, took a little longer than I was expecting at the time, and I had this trip planned. So here I was. I go into security at Pearson Airport. I've got about 5 letters say, I'm trans, I've had this surgery, here's a letter from my surgeon explaining on and on and on. But that wasn't good enough for them. As far as they were concerned, okay, we've got a female body here. Those scanning things are amazing. I don't know how they do that. But we've got a female body and we've got a passport that has an M on it still. So I guess it's just their policy that we got to do a full background check on this person to make sure they really are who they say they are. It took 2 to 3 hours, which made me miss my connecting flight. And from that perspective, I mean, in 2011, with these amazing computer databases that I know Canada lets the US look at, I was a little surprised that it took that long. And I was also prodded. I'm sure that, I don't know if it was curiosity or what, but some of the questions about my transition, it's like, maybe you don't really need to know the fine-tuned details of my sexual life and things like that. But it's frustrating because it seems every month there's a story of a trans person somewhere outed as trans. It's tough enough to be outed, let alone denied access to an airplane.
Yeah, and I understand many issues come up for people using washrooms as well. That's an issue.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's kind of been the big wave. We're seeing, quote, bathroom bills launched all over the world, almost as if it's a reaction, this I call them the religious right wing, are upset that they've been losing to the gay and lesbians, all these court cases for human rights and equality. So now they're taking out their frustration on the trans community by trying to create bills and laws that realistically are not enforceable. I mean, unless you have airport scanners at every public washroom, how do you know what people have under their pants when they walk in and out of a bathroom?
Heather?
What are some of the biggest issues facing trans people today?
I'd say there's 3 or 4 major issues. Human rights is obviously the biggest starting point, and we're starting to see some movement. Having government bodies recognize that trans people exist and have a unique set of challenges sets the ball in motion for society to learn about the issues and to hopefully learn to understand and accept them. And the spin-off from human rights gets to all the other policies that are now needing to be revised. Healthcare policies, the majority of trans people need to see some type of medical resource. Not everyone's going to go through the hormones and the surgeries, but those are realities for a lot of trans people, and getting access to those resources is still a challenge, especially right here in Newfoundland. They still want to send trans people to a clinic in Toronto, and that's the one and only place where they will accept a recommendation to proceed with funding surgical procedures. And the global experts are saying that's not necessary anymore. You don't need any specialist in Toronto. Another major issue is getting identification documents changed, especially for those who are not either non-op or pre-op, as we say. Being outed. Privacy is a huge issue for a lot of us, and some people even criticize Caitlyn for not revealing more, I guess, during the Diane interview, but it's just, you know what, we all have a right to privacy, and nobody really needs to know everything about you. And if you're walking into a bar, you look like you're 18 and beautiful and young, you're going to have to out yourself if you're trans. All of a sudden, the bartender and the bouncer might know, okay, we have a trans person here. And who knows what type of spin-off. I mean, nobody deserves to be outed against their will if it's not necessary.
What's the cruelest thing that's ever been done to you? Because I'm sure that there are people who, times were different then. I mean, Caitlyn Jenner has opened everyone's eyes, and there's been a lot of support, and you always, it's always a tragedy when someone has to live a lie. So it's always good when you can be yourself. In your own experience, going through all this back a number of years ago, things must have been pretty tough.
They have. Now, I'll be openly honest and say I've had an amazingly good experience here in Newfoundland. It's 8 years now I've been here. And I guess, unfortunately, it's the institutions and the organizations that have given me the biggest challenge and not individuals. It's losing a supposedly safe and secure government job shortly after coming out as trans. And then the follow-up of losing job competitions, coincidentally being runner-up at this one and runner-up at that one, winning this competition only to have them change their mind and cancel the competition, and going to a Human Rights Commission to complain about the healthcare system, and for them to have to come back and say, we don't have the teeth in our act, in our scope of work to help you, when it's there in other provinces. Sure, there's been the odd individual that has made derogatory comments, rarely to my face. I guess I'm scary and intimidating for some reason. I like to think I'm lovable and all that, but yeah, luckily for me, I have not faced any type of violence that so many trans people suffer, to the point that we have to commemorate it globally every November 20th as Trans Day of Remembrance.
We're going to take a short break, but please stay with us. We'll be back with more of Issues and Answers.
Blackheads, dirt and oil clogging.
Welcome back, everyone. You're watching Issues and Answers, and Jennifer McCreath is our special guest on this week's program, and Heather Gillis has our next question. Heather?
Jennifer, I wanted to ask you, how important is the proper use of pronouns when someone is transitioning?
I think it's a very important way of demonstrating respect and understanding of the situation. If you're not sure, you can always ask the person. And I think another interesting comment to make is there's a new movement of trans people under the trans umbrella, some of them that do not like the binary. They don't like masculine or feminine. There's actually third gender pronouns that now exist that people are asking to be referred to as. So it makes an already complicated situation even more complex. But at the same time, I think it's great in ways because it demonstrates why are we so binary with sex and gender. It really doesn't have to be that way.
We have a minute left in the program, and I just want to ask you a question. What is your message to someone who's out there who might be watching this and they're transgender and they're afraid to come out and say that they are?
I think ultimately you can't talk yourself out of a birth defect. I know that's an issue that has also come up with a lot of the naysayers. Reach out, find someone to talk to. Reach out to me. Use the internet, Google. There's lots of trans people, trans resources, organizations that can give you some tips, give you some guidance. The coming out process itself, it's tough because you have to tell everyone, and then you have to be the expert because they're all going to have questions. So it's a lot to handle, but it can be done, and I want to prove that it can be done here. A lot of trans people from Newfoundland leave for Toronto and Vancouver. I'm not leaving. I'm staying here. And I might even run in the next election.
Well, we will look forward to watching your future political plans. Of course, you did run, in the municipal election last time. People will remember that. Jennifer McCreath, I want to thank you very much for coming in today and sharing your experience with us.
So glad to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
And thanks to Heather Gillis as well for sitting in this week. That is our program. Thank you so much for watching Issues and Answers. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Canada's superstation, NTV.